Ford is an auto and a mobility company. We are in this transition right now, and it's really important because of those societal factors I mentioned. But mobility for us, first off, you have to link, and it gets back to culture and people, you have to link a mission for folks, right? It's not about coming in and designing the next widget, et cetera. And it always comes down to what is the why of your company. The why of our company, going back to our founder, is making people's lives better. Henry Ford, the reason he started a car company is because he wanted to figure out a way to democratize this technology that was only available for rich people. And he gave the ability for people to actually travel 3 miles outside of where they were born. Because most people lived, believe it or not, within 3 miles. They never went out. He gave them that opportunity, economic development, et cetera. So our why has always been about making people's lives better. And our how is about how do we enable mobility? And for us, mobility is just allowing people to live, play, and work where they want.
Right. And so as we move from, and you already mentioned sort of some of this being on demand, some of it being about access, and some of it being riding versus driving, as we move to a world where potentially transportation and mobility is delivered more as a service, that's obviously a very different world than transportation and mobility delivered as a product that I buy. How do you sort of prepare Ford for that, and what are the sort of fundamental changes in your business model, in your company DNA, and your talent that kind of lead to you guys being able to drive that?
Well, the way you prepare the organization, this is a really important piece. How do you rewire the house while electricity is on, right, with your business? And the way we're thinking about this is we have our core business, designing and developing and manufacturing great cars and trucks, and we have these emerging opportunities around mobility, and it's really a lot of it around the monetization of the use of our product. And the most important thing of how you prepare the organization is you give the organization context. You have to be out there, you have to be communicating it, you have to be linking it to how customers and society is changing, because guess what, if you don't, and you introduce these new businesses, these new business models around mobility, and as we do, let's say we want to do transportation as a service, et cetera, guess what, if you don't give the organization context, they're going to view that as, oh, that's all that new stuff. I'm not going to help them, right? Because that's a threat to the core business. So you have to, it has to be an and solution. What you have to be able to tell people is we're not moving from an old business to a new business. We're just moving to a bigger business. And when you get that context, because we have in our history where we've tried to go off to shiny, sexy new things, guess what? Didn't work. Because we didn't give the organization context. And oh, by the way, the people that weren't in that shiny, sexy new thing, they felt that they were chopped liver, right? Just do that core stuff and you won't be valued. So it's really important that we do that. And that's how we prepare the organization. And then you can go off and you can dedicate resources to it. You can bring in new competencies and new people. You can do M&A that will then be embraced by the organization so that you...
It's one thing to look at and say, technology is important, we should really work on that, and mobility is important, and AI is important. It's another thing to be in a world where you're competing against Google, which has been putting a ton of money towards this stuff. Uber went out and bought basically Carnegie Mellon and imported them over there. How does a company like Ford, based in Detroit with all that heritage, compete culturally and financially with the biggest and brightest?
Yeah, you have these executives who are good at making cars, but not necessarily good at making mobility.
Oh, okay. Well, with mobility, you do need a vehicle. You actually need to go someplace.
We got that part.
And, first off, the way we approach it is the designing and developing and manufacturing a car is a very intense and a difficult endeavor. I mean, people sometimes just say, it's not that hard.
I had an Uber person tell me that.
Listen, at the end of the day, you have a vehicle with 4,000 parts coming together. It has to work. It has to be durable. It has to meet regulatory requirements. And oh, by the way, when you look at the software content of our vehicles, our new F-150 has over 150 million lines of code in it. It's more than double or triple a Boeing.
But you're watching software companies, and you're watching people like Elon Musk say, we can just jump right into this, and we can put our brain power and our money together, and we can go and compete and beat you guys. How do you keep up with them?
Well, first off, you make sure that you focus on that core business, that those vehicles are designed right and they run well. But also at the same time, we make sure that we're looking at the future and saying to ourselves, what skills do we need to continue to be successful going forward. So we have in our business a lot of great software skill on embedded software. We just went out and said, you know what? We also need to develop our cloud-based skills, right? To develop apps, because as we are traditionally a product company, more and more also will be providing services to customers as well, not only because it's a good business decision because you can get more recurring revenues, but you have better ways to satisfy consumers like ones who don't want to own a vehicle. And as we've done that, we've done things like we took an equity position in Pivotal Labs a couple of weeks ago. And the reason we did that is not because we just wanted to make some noise, look at us, we're doing something in the software business.
That never happens.
That never happens in our business, not at all. But we did it because, listen, we said to ourselves, we really need to up our game in learning around delivering these, advanced software methodologies, and we'll be able to do it a lot faster if we own a piece of Pivotal. They've been great partners for us. That's how you do it. We ask ourselves 3 questions. As we look at not only our core business, but these emerging opportunities, we're asking ourselves 3 really important questions. Where do we want to play? Right? Because you can boil the ocean. If you want to be in AVs, what part do you want to be in? You want to be in the commercial side, you want to be in the passenger car side, all those kind of things. You can boil the ocean, so you have to be really clear on where do you want to play. Then we have to be really honest with ourselves that says, how do we win? Right? What unmet need are we being able to satisfy? Is there a business model in there for us to make money at the same time? And then the third question, to your point, Peter, is what are the capabilities that we need? And in some cases, we'll have that capability in-house. In other cases, we'll say we don't have it, but we want it to be core to us, so we have to grow that either through acquiring talent or acquiring companies. And in some cases, we'll just say, you know what? There's other companies out there that do this really terrifically, and we're going to partner with them. So where do we best start? By addressing the mobility challenges facing people all over the world. So let's start with what we mean by mobility. It is more about just getting and moving from point A to point B, because the world is changing. People interact in new ways. They share information very, very differently. And they consume products and services in more ways than we've ever seen before. So at Ford, mobility is far more than motion. It's really about progress. It's about human progress. It involves such things as moving food to the stores that you shop in every day, ambulances arriving at the scene of an accident to save a life, or making it to your daughter's recital on time. It's about getting to work, whether that involves a 3-hour commute or working from the local coffee shop. 4 important megatrends are driving our thinking around mobility. The first one is urbanization, or growing population in urban environments. Today, there are 28 megacities, or metropolitan areas with total populations of more than 10 million people worldwide. Fast forward to 2030, and we expect to see at least 41 megacities worldwide. Bill Ford, our executive chairman and great-grandson of Henry Ford, has been a passionate advocate for the need for all of us to care more about the subject of mobility. And he has been for years warning of global gridlock if we don't deal with these realities of urbanization. Because the existing infrastructure for motor vehicles simply cannot sustain the sheer number of vehicles expected to be on the road in the coming years. So our roadmap has to include not only smarter cars, but smarter roads and smarter cities. At the same time, many cities are growing. We're also seeing a second megatrend, and that's the rapid rise of the growth of the global middle class. The Brookings Institute reports that the global middle class will double in size by 2030, going from 2 billion to 4 billion people, with Asia driving much of that growth. And many in this growing middle class will aspire to own a car. It's one of the traditional markers of economic progress for the last half century. And with that, it's bringing a new set of challenges. If you've been to China in the past decade, I think you know what I'm talking about. Think beyond global gridlock. Think about the third megatrend, the issue of air quality and related health risks from congestion. The World Health Organization and others have noted that urban air pollution is a serious social and public health issue. Check this out. Imagine having to remind your kids never to go outside without their face masks. Or imagine having to go grocery shopping for your parents who live 30 miles away because the elderly have been warned to stay indoors. The fourth megatrend, changing consumer attitudes and priorities. Millennials, those born between the early 1980s and the early 2000s, they're delaying marriage, delaying buying homes, delaying having children. And as consumers, they behave very differently from the people of my generation and older, especially when it comes to mobility. In the US, for instance, 47% of people today like using their smartphone to plan their transportation. And 39% say that they travel by bus, train, or taxi so that they can multitask. And 34%, well, they say they'd be interested in renting their car to strangers if they could. So these four megatrends are changing the way we view innovation and mobility at Ford.
When you think about the traditional set of partners, though, that you have, the industry for, I don't know what you'd say, 20, 30, 50 years has sort of evolved to support the current sort of industrial-centric automotive industry. And so you have a bunch of existing partners. Some of those are the dealership network, some of those are manufacturing partners. How do you decide when you're going to work with them to evolve them into the future versus times where you might need to be more disruptive and do something yourself that you used to partner for, because that's the only way you're going to be able to create the sort of modern integrated solution?
We look at it the following way. First off, our approach is how do we disrupt ourselves before others do? And that's a really important statement to make within the company. And secondly, the second most important two questions that we challenge the organization with is how do we challenge custom and question tradition and not take anything for granted? And when you give the organization the permission, particularly in a 113-year-old company, to actually ask that, wonderful things happen in terms of creativity. So when you look at the issue of, do we want to work with a specific supplier who we worked with for many years on a specific technology? From our standpoint, when we ask those two questions, then we get back to, do we want to, as we look at the opportunity, or do we want to give that margin up to somebody else, or do we want to make a core for ourselves? And those are the type of questions that we're asking. And we also have to be very honest with ourselves that says, listen, as the world changes, relationships are important, but at the end of the day, you also have to look at the business logic of continuing to work with others that you've worked with for so long, and then make very rational decisions.
How do you hire people with different DNA into the organization and make sure that they stay and don't come for 18 to 24 months and then decide to go back to where they were before?
This is a really important question because it's the war. It is.
It's a very important question.
Listen, everybody heard the term. Name the term. War for talent, the best team wins, all that kind of stuff. So how do you do it? First off, what you do is you want people across every cohort, but it's a lot in the millennials. They want to make a difference. They want to make their dent on the universe. Yes, they want to be compensated appropriately, et cetera. They want to be at a higher mission. And our mission is around making people's lives better. And what better way of doing that is not only developing great cars and trucks going forward, but helping solve some of the world's most pressing societal issues around mobility. And then secondly, you develop them, and you also have to have a realization. Like here in Silicon Valley, we used to be a company, if you didn't have, if you decided to leave Ford Motor Company after 5 years, you were excommunicated. Don't ever bother coming back. First off, here, we've recognized a couple of things. One is a lot of people join companies here in Silicon Valley. They don't join companies, they join projects. Right. Right?
You have to get pension in Silicon Valley after 5 years.
They join projects. So we have to be comfortable as a company knowing that in some cases, we'll rent people for a while. But at the same time, we also want to tell them, you can come to Ford and go from one project and do that for a year, 18 months, whatever. Go to the next project. You can have a great career at Ford. I'm an example of that. I never joined Ford thinking, one day I'm going to live in 4 different countries and have all these experiences. I never thought I'd be able to do the things I've been able to do. In my 27 years at Ford, I've probably had 8 careers. And that is something that we want to give people a mission, but also they can have a great career at Ford and work on something that they can point to, not a line of code and say, I did that, I was part of that. That's really important to folks.
Do you take an experience point of view then, that's everything from the product itself and the service itself to how do I get to it in the first place? So how do you think about the dealership network and your channels of distribution as it relates to creating this integrated experience? Because certainly a Tesla gets to own end-to-end that entire experience throughout all of those touch points.
And as was mentioned earlier, here in the U.S. with the franchise law, by law, we cannot go direct to customers. At the same time, our dealers, we have 10,000 dealers around the globe. That is a huge advantage. I think somebody mentioned, the whole issue about having a distribution network. So the way we have to do this, first off, as we go off on this journey, we have to bring our dealers with us. And we have to say, what is your role as we go forward? Right? Because you're good partners for us. And let's face it, I know we talk about being a little bit in a bubble here, but let's face it, folks, you're not going to hit the buy button and then a vehicle's going to show up. People want.
Actually, Patrick Collison from Stripe said you would be able to do that.
Well,
in first class.
There's a difference between you could do it to people do they want to do it. Right? It's the second biggest purchase you're ever going to make after your house. Right? You're going to buy your house online? People want to feel, they want to touch.
Zillow said that.
Well, no, I talked to him. I went and visited him, and he said that's a good revenue opportunity. I said, not for us. But first off, it's also, again, it's about people, and it's about giving the organization context. So we're spending a lot of time with our dealers and saying, here is the way the world is changing. You have a choice. Do you want to work with us? Right? Because it's the customer who's in charge, not us. Do you want to work with us? And how do we outfit the stores going forward? I mean, somebody mentioned, the stores could be very different going forward. And how do you bring them with us as opposed to we're going to do it separately and we're going to break the law and we're going to create World War III with our distribution network? That is a recipe for disaster.
Okay, before we get to it, we're interviewing Elon Musk tomorrow night. What do you think of what he's done?
Well, I think Elon has done a very good job at just raising the awareness and the importance of electrified vehicles. And I think it's helped support, we're the #1 seller of plug-in hybrids here in the U.S. And I think raising that has been very good. Listen, we can learn something from everybody. We're a company that doesn't look at competitor A or competitor B, whether they're big or small or new or old. Our approach is what can we learn? And I think they've done some very good things in terms of that we've learned from some in terms of how to use technology to interact with their customers and be able to make them more satisfied. We've learned a number of things. So
he's become a real personality-driven thing. He's got fans. Is that how cars have? People don't go, Mark Field, sorry. They don't have a man crush on Mark Field.
No.
But is that important going forward, or do you?
Well, I think I can only bring it back to Ford, and what's important to us as a company is our brand. And our brand has always been known around attainability, around ingenuity and innovation, and around kind of people serving people. It's a brand with a family behind it, a brand that has always kind of reached out to the community. The brand is the most important thing, and I think that's one thing that has driven our success over these many, many years, and recently since we didn't take the government money and we did this on our own. And those are the things that we focus on.